Is Doctor Who ever going to return to our screens? It's been 2 months since season 15 ended with that monumental cliffhanger, really, with Ncuti Gatwa regenerating into Billie Piper. But still, we've got no answers. I'm Lou Griffin, I'm sci-fi and fantasy editor at Radio Times.
And I'm Lewis Knight, I'm news and trends editor at Radio Times.
And here we are with all the options about what could possibly happen to Doctor Who. Just a bit of a disclaimer, this is speculation. The BBC's most recent statement was that Doctor Who's not been shelved, but of course a decision is still being made. It hasn't come yet about the next sort of few seasons and whether that's going to be with Disney.
It's all up in the air.
It's all up in the air.
I think obviously the first potential option, which would probably be the cleanest and most simple, would be if the deal with Disney gets renewed. So that would obviously very much decide the future of the show, with this co-production continuing with BBC and Disney. Obviously, Russell T Davies has been very open about the fact that he's been writing episodes, been working on episodes. There's lots of stuff in the pipeline. I mean, clearly that cliffhanger with Billie Piper was such a big thing. Clearly he must have, we hope he must have some idea of what will come next. So I think we've just got to see really if Disney are interested. I suppose we must be asking, why is it still taking so long for them to decide? It could be, I know there was originally kind of the suggestion that they were waiting for everything that they'd already signed off on to air and to judge after that. And we've obviously still got the spin-off series, personally don't love the title, War Between the Land and the Sea. Very much does what it says on the tin, it sounds like. But then at the same time, I would have imagined, I'd be very surprised if that blew up and became bigger than Doctor Who. So you would have thought a lot of it would be dependent on how Doctor Who had performed.
As far as we know, a decision could come at any time. As you say, it could be that Disney's waiting until
we could be chatting now, and they could decide any
second.
Could
be coming this moment.
Yeah.
but yeah, again, it could be that they're waiting to see how the spin-off performs to assess everything together. Obviously, we've got a bit of an inkling about how it performed in the UK, but Disney are being a little bit more secretive about it, I think.
Yeah, we don't really seem very clear. And obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about the overnight ratings, even though the television landscape has changed massively anyway. So overnight ratings aren't entirely indicative of anything. It did seem like it was slightly down on previous performances.
Yeah. So
there was kind of a lot to take into account. But then the BBC was very much backing how strong it had been with younger audiences and across the board. So there were definitely other pluses to it. So there might be other aspects to it that Disney are taking into account that they've not spoken about publicly yet.
And in terms of how it would impact the show, we'd expect it to kind of carry on as it has done, albeit with a different Doctor, which will be a big change in itself. But as you said, I would expect Russell T Davies to carry on as showrunner. And I do feel like Disney is quite a good fit for it, to be honest. Doctor Who's always been a little bit family friendly.
Yeah.
It feels like a good way for it to go. And I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility. I think fans are sort of wondering if, because this is taking such a long time, that it's not going to happen, but it could just be that the decision has taken a little bit longer than we expected. Yeah,
and I think Disney Plus is clearly a bit of a home for some of these kind of cult sci-fi fantasy series. So, and as you mentioned, that family-friendly kind of vibe to it, it kind of fits into that. And clearly there was an ambition as well to kind of expand Doctor Who into being a bit of its own mini The Whoniverse. After all, it's been branded as The Whoniverse. We've got the spin-offs. Maybe that might be another thing that comes into it. Maybe there'll be a decision that they make, and maybe they want to slim down and focus on the main show. Maybe they want to focus on more spin-offs. So there's so many potential kind of avenues for them to go down with it if they did want to do it. But yeah, it does feel like a natural home for it. With the BBC. So I think clearly that would be the most simple and clean solution. So hopefully that might be what happens, but it's not the only potential solution.
It's not. It could be picked up by another streamer. If Disney decides they don't want to recommission another season, it could be shopped around to other streamers, Netflix, Prime Video, potentially Max, HBO. I feel like this would be a longer route to getting Doctor Who back on screens, because it would take, the decision from Disney and then another amount of time and then figuring out how it would work with another streamer. But it's not impossible. I feel like Doctor Who is such an institution. Surely other streamers would jump at the chance to have it as part of their property.
Yeah, you'd imagine one of them would want to snap it up. But then I suppose there's always then the question of, obviously, if you've got other kind of finance becoming involved, then other voices will probably want to be involved in like
Yeah.
the shape of the show and like the creative, and want to have creative input. They might not want to exactly carry on as it was before. They might want to like make changes. So I suppose that kind of comes into it as well. So there's probably a lot to consider in terms of like behind the scenes. Like would a different home impact that? I mean, obviously we've a completely different scenario, but obviously we've seen when Amazon kind of got all the James Bond rights, for example, eventually there were differences, and eventually it led to them parting ways with Barbara Broccoli, who's obviously traditionally somebody that looked after it. So would that mean if it goes to different streamers, somebody else might be a different showrunner, or there might be a different like production team kind of involved in that? So there's a lot that would come with that. So yeah, I think if that did happen, it would definitely lead to kind of a bit of a hiatus, you'd think anyway, just while all of that gets like hashed out.
Yeah, I don't think somewhere like Prime would be out of the question, because they have been known to save shows before.
Cult sci-fi shows. They've again also that's something that they've kind of built up a bit of a niche for.
Yeah.
They've obviously recently ended, sadly, R.I.P. The Wheel of Time. So there's
don't
definitely
get me
kind of
started.
like there's a lot of Final Fantasy kind of cult shows that are kind of ending. So also they might think, oh, actually, here's a proven IP. Like let's get this in here. And also I feel like unlike Disney Plus, which I think has really made like an example of its kind of like British content, that like Amazon has like dipped its toes, but I feel like it's not got such an overt like kind of presence in terms of like British television, British kind of franchises. So maybe that could be their in if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, another possibility potentially. Obviously Netflix is trying to diversify its content massively. We've seen a lot more sport, a lot more of their dedication to anime.
Terrestrial.
Could this be another sort of way for them to diversify their content? Maybe.
Potentially.
I would imagine though Netflix, would they want to change the tone a little bit of the show to make it a little bit more relevant to their adult audience? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think also because Netflix, unlike some other streaming services, is so incredibly international, they probably really would be wanting to take all of these other markets into account. I mean, you imagine most of them would, but I feel like there might be changes they might want to make. Again, we don't know how firm some of them would be on perhaps wanting to have a bit of creative input, or whether they would just be kind of actually happy to snap it up as is currently. Yeah,
I would hope in that situation that some of the key creatives behind Doctor Who would stay in place in that case, because I would be worried about too much change all at once if some of the powers that be at Bad Wolf decided it wasn't for them anymore and also went to another streamer. I would fear what would sort of...
You want some continuity.
Yeah, exactly.
You want it to... I mean, and also, considering where it left off, like, it kind of needs at least Billie Piper's face to be there, to kind of at least set something up. Because I just feel like there's also there were a lot of like plot threads that were up in the air as well. It wasn't just that... Obviously, that was a massive cliffhanger, but there was different things going on with, you know, the Pantheon, the boss, Susan. That needs to be resolved. So, like, there's a lot... Anita Dobson.
Yeah.
What streaming service will snap up Anita Dobson? So there's a lot to be.
Surely all of them.
I hope you would think. So there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And so you feel like they can do a wholesale revamp. That would be a bit strange considering where it left off. And Doctor Who fans love answers.
Yeah, we've also very recently had quite a reboot, so it's not. I feel like it's not quite time.
We can't have another massive tonal shift. I feel like that wouldn't go down great either. So of course there's always improvements to be made, and I don't think anyone, even the people that were really big fans of like the latest seasons, would argue it was perfect, or they still had some issues with it. So it would be kind of ideal to make some changes, but I don't think a massive tonal shift and a total rebrand is in anyone's best interests, really.
No, exactly.
But of course, alternatively, the BBC still remain quite a brave broadcaster.
Yeah.
Maybe they could just they still seem very committed to the Doctor Who brand and it coming back in the future. Maybe they could just go it alone again.
Yeah, I really like this option if it is financially viable.
I think that's the thing, is if whether they can do it. And also, like, as often been argued, I think Stephen Moffat argued in the past, like, sometimes the great things in Doctor Who came out of budget cuts. And you think back to some of their, like, best episodes, they're actually very, like, lo-fi, not really many effects. It's all very quite small. Obviously, you can't do that every week because the nature of the show kind of demands that it needs to have a bit of variety and change. But at the same time, you know, those kind of... you know, sometimes high concept, but actually very practical, very small in scope and size, actually can be the best episodes. And
Yeah.
you think like Blink, I don't think you need a massive studio interest to do Blink. I know everybody says Blink's like the best episode, but like it's a great episode. It didn't require
It came out of, didn't it, Stephen Moffat not being able to use much of David Tennant, so
yeah, they kind of
he
had
was
to make
forced
the
to do it.
most of what they had.
Yeah.
And also I think there's also a bit of a charm to Doctor Who being a little bit low budget. I think people like things to be a little bit ropey.
It's kind of that nostalgia thing, isn't it? Most of us grew up with the Doctor Who being a little bit, you know, lo-fi and having to make do. And as you say, I think it is, you know, the mother of invention. I think it, you know, the stories only get better, the narratives only get better when, you know, you have to think of an alternative or get a little bit creative. That's not to say it's a terrible thing, Doctor Who having a big budget. Whether or not you like how it's been used, it does kind of add a little bit more security to the show. You know, it does help it along in various ways. It's not all just used on, you know,
Special effects.
CGI and special effects.
And obviously a lot of it will go into other things like marketing
Yeah.
and, you know, how that can support it being syndicated and things. So it's not purely a question of what we see on screen, maybe where the money's going. But then at the same time, obviously Doctor Who's got a very devoted fan base. Maybe if it was a bit lower cost to create, it might not necessarily require that to get a return on investment. But at the same time, television, particularly in the UK now, is so expensive. I don't know whether that would be entirely financially viable. But if the BBC could find a way, that would be, I'd find that pretty interesting. And I'd be intrigued to see what they could do with it, even without kind of money coming from other international circles.
Yeah, fewer cooks in the kitchen as well in terms of creative voices. If it's solely back to BBC Studios' Bad Wolf, there's a lot more say that I think those creative teams would have over it if they don't have those partners to answer to.
Yeah, and it sounded like Russell T Davies had a lot of freedom at the same time with Disney, but I suppose it's a question of like at the same time, naturally, if you've got multiple partners involved, you've also got to at least consider what they would think or how they'd feel about it.
There's another option, which obviously isn't the best for us, but the final option is that it goes on hiatus. It's exterminated. That it goes on hiatus or that it's cancelled. And I think that sounds very catastrophic.
Yes.
But there's ways that I think it could be beneficial. Obviously, I think we're already going to be looking at a little hiatus, considering that no new episodes of Doctor Who have been filmed. So it's not going to be on air for
a while. So that's basically a certainty that it's got a break. Yeah. Whatever happens next.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Doctor Who will ever fully be cancelled or go away. We've obviously seen it be cancelled once before, and it was brought back even better, some would say, than it ever was. And I think that there really does have the potential for that to happen again if the worst does happen and it has to go off air for a little bit. I would imagine that the fans who have grown up with the 2005 Russell T Davies reboot wouldn't let it rest for too long. I think they'd bring it back in some way. I think there's always going to be an appetite for Doctor Who in some form.
I think even Russell himself kind of said that as well. Like even if it goes away, like someone will like revive it and do something interesting with it at some point. And as we've seen previously, even when it was kind of finished after the Sylvester McCoy years, and there was like a long hiatus. There was a lot of fan love and interest still. We had like novels, and then we've ended up having audio series. There's like and comics. There's like so many other formats as well that can be done with it, and there could be like web series, all sorts of stuff that could be done. So even if it had a break in terms of its traditional format for a while, it'll kind of live on in something, and then it will inevitably make a return. I mean, at the very least, I would hope and expect there will be a special of some kind, at least to tie up whatever the Billie Piper cliffhanger is trying to say. You would hope, and also I feel like there's obviously been a lot of theorising and discussion. Obviously, we've still got David Tennant's 14th Doctor out there. Yeah. If there is a Billie Piper Doctor, or at least a Billie Piper something, people are naturally going to go, oh, are those two going to ever reunite at some point? And that does feel like a nostalgia trip ripe for exploration.
There's so many stories you could tell, even beyond the main narrative. I loved Tales of the TARDIS.
Yes,
bringing back all those incredible Doctors who are still out there, as we know. So
yeah, and I feel like even if we were talking like in a few years' time for the next anniversary or something, even if there was a bit of a break, but then sometimes like a break is good, like as they say, change is as good as a rest, but also a rest can be as good as a change. For a bit, people, we build up a bit of time for people to miss it, for people to have a bit of an appetite for it. So I think even some people who are feeling a bit disillusioned with recent episodes, I think actually if they were given a while without having anything, they will want to come back for something.
Yeah, we've been very spoiled, haven't we, with the amount of Doctor Who on our screens of late. So.
Yeah, I mean, especially after a period where we were getting like a special or two a year, like to have like a full series. I know they were slightly smaller than what we'd probably gotten used to with the BBC, but yeah, we've had like an ample amount of content since the 60th anniversary. So I guess, yeah, maybe we've got to get used to, harder times. It's a cost of living crisis, less Doctor Who out there. So we've got to pull our socks up and get on with it, really, and get rewatching.
Yeah, I mean, it is all there. Most of it is there on BBC iPlayer to go back and watch. And we can only hope that Doctor Who, I'm sure it will live on in some form. It's just what form that's going to take.
That'll take.
So let us know what you would like to happen to Doctor Who in the future, which option is your favourite, and what would you like to see from the show in future. And keep your eyes on Radio Times, radiotimes.com, and the app for all our Doctor Who goodness. Thank you.